Hello, everyone, and you welcome back to another appointment with Progress Over Perfection, POP, the podcast that change your life in better. Today, we're going to talk about injuries and relationship and love with Chantelle Wood from Restorative.com. Hello, Chantelle, how are you?
I'm really good, thank you. Thank you for inviting me here today.
Welcome and thank you to accept my invitation. You work with people that suffer from injuries.
Well, I am a rehabilitation counsellor, which is a specialist form of counsellor that works with people that have injuries and illness, returning them to work and life. So, a lot of the clients that I work with have sustained injuries at work or in car accidents, and usually the injuries are life changing in some way, shape, or form.
Hmm. And how you got in this work?
I originally studied back in the day psychology, and then I went on to specialize in rehabilitation counseling, which has been absolutely the perfect alignment for me. It's actually being able to help people in the day to day, being in the workplaces with them, being able to support them in those mediated workplace discussions as well, being a facilitative mediator. It's really been something that, yeah, I've been doing it now for over a decade, and I feel I'm doing exactly what I'm meant to be doing.
Hmm. You're based in Perth.
Yes.
Um, do you find difficult for people that have this kind of situation to find the right help?
I think it's very difficult no matter what state you're in. So, restorative, my practice operates across Australia, the team. So, it's really great that we can reach some of those regional locations as well in New South Wales and in far north Queensland as well. But certainly, in terms of WA specifically, I think it's really hard to find sometimes the right fit at the right therapist for you. Like, I'm sure you would find that as well, like with your patients, that people go through a few different therapists before they land on one that really aligns with them. And you want to make
Mm.
sure that they're able to find one that specializes in what that problem is. So at Restorative and as a rehabilitation counselor, I specialize in workplace injuries and people that are working through that problem. Whereas if there's other problems that someone presents with, if they're not the right fit, it's really important to cross refer to your network and be able to link them in with the right supports that actually do specialize in that particular area.
Mm.
So I just find that in WA, yeah, it's a bit hard to sometimes make sure you've got the right fit from the very beginning for people. Yeah.
As you know, I work with couples, and this podcast mostly is about relationship. From your experience, if you can tell me what are the major problem that couples face during this kind of situation.
I'm so glad you asked that. I think injuries are life changing for the person who's had the injury, but also for the entire relationship or family unit. That it's something that changes everything. That one day, dad goes to work and then the next afternoon he comes home with a life changing injury. It's going to affect everyone in that house. In terms of impacting couples and relationships as a whole, I find that it is really something that often makes or breaks, given the catastrophic nature of a lot of the injuries, and particularly when they go on for quite a long time. So, for in Australia, for instance, there's such a high instance of musculoskeletal injuries that happen. So, and they're only on the increase, unfortunately, in Australia. The workplace injuries are only increasing despite all the information and health and safety. They're only increasing, unfortunately. So, with that in mind, with the musculoskeletal injuries, that normally has quite a recovery time period, and that person is in quite a bit of chronic pain. And that chronic pain and that ongoing experience of pain impacts relationships, impacts how they show up in their relationships. And it's really quite challenging for quite a prolonged period. And that is in the instances where the person actually recovers, which is not always the case. Sometimes that their injury is permanent, and they're not actually going to be able to recover from it. And that impacts relationships and how they feel about themselves and others quite debilitatingly.
Mm. From your experience, how many of the couple actually can survive after this kind of injuries?
I also believe it depends on how strong they were pre injury. I believe that makes a big difference. Couples that were connected and couples that actually communicated and were able to talk about issues before an injury or accident happens at work, absolutely would have a better way of getting through that journey. But the ones that may have been struggling and not able to communicate, that in the beginning is usually really, really challenging for them. And I have actually seen a significant number of relationships end during a workers' compensation claim or a work injury process because they're just not able to cope with the stress that's involved in that system.
Mm. What do you think is the most difficult part for not the injured, but the person that take care of the injured?
I think there's two things. I think firstly, there is the lack of understanding, particularly if an injury is invisible. So, particularly in the case of chronic pain, for instance, let's say lower back pain, which is quite a significant common injury in Australia in the construction industry or even in healthcare workers. When they have an injury like that, it's kind of invisible, so you can't see it. So, the significant other or the next of kin is not able to actually see, okay, compared to a broken leg where it's in a cast, there's actually a visible injury there. When it's something that's more internalized, it is quite hard to have that memory and to remember that person is still in pain, even if they might not present like that in that moment. So that's the first part. The second part, in terms of the family members and how they may struggle, I think also is how long the process goes on for. So when someone has an injury at work, there's usually a period of time where they have to get their claim form in quite rapidly. There has to be a process of determining the claim, which is quite stressful, and insurers are involved in that, or government departments. There's usually a continuous assessment process as well, regular treatments people have to attend. So there's a lot of time taken away from the relationship and the family and what life
Mm.
used to look like. So I think there's a level of understanding that, in a couple, that they need to have that realization that things are not just going to be normal, even if the person presents a little bit better one day. It is really absolutely up and down when someone's recovering from an injury.
I was watching a few months ago this conversation where and this guy said men are often the one that leaves if the partner an injury, where it's more common that the woman stay in the relationship even during severe injuries. Do you find this claim correct in your experience?
Absolutely. I think that's relevant in, in health issues as a whole. Like there's been a lot of studies that have been done in Australia, particularly through like the Breast Cancer Network, that when
Mm,
women get diagnosed with breast cancer, a lot of the relationships do deteriorate and a lot of the men do leave that relationship. In comparison to men's cancer diagnosis, women are more committed and that they do stay. And I know that's a generalized statement, but there's actually been a lot of studies that have been done to illustrate
mm,
that, which is really upsetting and really devastating when someone's already going through an acute health diagnosis to then
yeah.
lose the relationship that they had before that, whether that be work related or otherwise, is so destabilizing for someone's mental health.
Do you have any idea of why this can happen? Why this discrepancy between the two genders?
Think the interconnectedness is perhaps down to when someone has the injury. I think if they're given a bit of a roadmap and a bit of an understanding as to what that recovery is going to look like, they need to bring in that significant other with them. I think that makes the biggest difference is that they're on the journey together. I think when there's a health crisis and that it becomes really individualized and that they're really managing it on their own and they're not bringing in that significant other, that's when the separation occurs, regardless of the gender. So I do feel that there needs to be a lot of interconnectedness early on to make sure that goes differently.
Mm. Again, maybe as you say, depends how the relationship was prior to injuries.
Yeah.
So if the couple were happy
Mm.
and connected and communicative and on point, they probably have a high chance to survive to the injuries. Where if couple doesn't have that kind of communication, it's easier for them to go in separate ways. That's correct.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the injury is probably maybe at some points the straw that broke the camel's back as well. Like, I think at that point that's like the final nail in the coffin for some relationships that weren't able to handle, something as significant as that. Because
Mm.
even a relatively minor injury at work, like it's still quite a significantly stressful process. And that's kind of a bit of a really catalyst for relationships, I find. Yeah.
So you, Chantal, when you come in this kind of situation, what do you do? What's your role?
So, when we receive a referral at Restorative, we are engaged for either a workplace injury that's occurred, a workplace dispute, so facilitating mediation and dispute resolution in the workplace, or also for providing like adjustment to injury counselling and helping someone, vocationally return to work in some way after an
Mm.
injury as well. So, we're there for kind of after the injury happens. So, at Restorative, we help people work out who is me after injury, which is a really privileged, honoured position to be in. And obviously, we meet all of our patients after the big bad thing has happened and help them work out now what life's going to look like. So, a lot of that and a lot of the clients that we work with can't return to what they were doing. So, a lot of their life, they've been doing one particular career. They got to be what they wanted to be when they grew up. And then when the injury happened, they can no longer be that thing. So, that in itself is so psychologically devastating to all of our clients that have to endure that grief and that loss. So, we're there to hold them through it and actually navigate a bit of a roadmap as to what can you do now? What's available to you? What transferable skills do you have that we can actually use to have you in a new work environment, or some upskilling, or what would life look like now? So, it's involving the client and also their family on that journey, with their treating team, to make sure that we're all on the same page, that we're actually headed somewhere, that this is not a dead end, that there is hope. I think that's always very important to engender that with patients, and that to know that there is going to be a way out of this.
So you actually help them to find a new opportunity as well.
Correct. So we are there from usually from very soon to when the injury happens. A lot of early intervention is increasing in Australia, which is great, through the treatment providers getting involved sooner. So we get involved quite early. We help them navigate adjusting to their injury firstly, and then we go into that vocational return to work support, and what that's going to look like. So we would do what's called a vocational assessment that looks at their transferable skills, their employment history, their career, educational history, their interests, their hobbies, their passions, what they're good at, what their computer skills are. Looking at all those things, we can start to actually map out, okay, like where could we actually go now in terms of work? Because for some people, for instance, that let's say someone in the mines in WA, which is quite common, they've only ever worked in the mines, they've never done anything else. We need to really start from scratch with that person as to, okay, blank slate, what can we do now? Like, we've got to work this out.
How is possible with all the regulation that Australia have that actually the injuries is increasing?
It's so upsetting. So Safe Work Australia is an incredible website. If your listeners would like to have some more information around that. So Safe Work Australia provides stats every year in terms of where we're tracking, and across all the different industries. So healthcare, construction, everything that's involved in Australian industries in work. And there's been so much that's shown that in the last 10 years, there's been a 34% increase. So we're only increasing. And in addition to that, most concerningly, there's actually been a 161% increase in psychological injuries at work. So the amount of injuries from 10 years ago to now that are psychological from the workplace, that are bullying and harassment, from post-traumatic instances that happen, have increased by such a significant amount, and they're only escalating as the years go on, unfortunately, we've seen.
161%.
161%, yep, for psychological injuries in 10 years.
Injury is something that is new in industry that it grew up so quick, or is always been there as a
I
thing.
think that there's been a lot of underreporting before now,
Yeah.
no doubt. about. I think that there's
Yeah.
been definitely, as you know, as a therapist as well, there's been a bit of a shift in terms of mental health in the workplace and more awareness. And, we're not just waiting to Are You Okay Day to say, Are you okay to a colleague? So I think there's been a lot more awareness of it. I do feel though, and a lot of clinicians that I work with, we all indicate that during COVID, a lot of those psychological injuries got a bit worse as well. So that kind of was a big factor. But certainly, and obviously that covers in that 10-year gap as well. But certainly I think there's been a rise in people understanding what they don't have to tolerate in the workplace anymore, that they don't have to tolerate being bullied, they don't need to be tolerating being harassed, that that's not acceptable, and that there are different pathways to help them that are there and that are available in Australia, because it's just not acceptable.
The most common ways partner accidentally make the recovery harder.
And I think partners can kind of have the expectation that the person is better than what they are. And perhaps that's hope, and maybe that's like projecting that they hope that they are. And perhaps that sometimes is not useful. I think that it's always important to provide that support. But I've noticed sometimes that partners can be really challenged by, their loved one being in pain and want to kind of try and move them through that process really quickly, or quickly find something else to go into now, or, not actually letting them just sit in that grief. Because particularly when there's a life-changing injury like a spinal cord injury or a brain injury, which is some of the patients that we work with at Restorative, they need time to actually adjust to that and grieve before they can move forward into something else. And sometimes I find that the partners, having the best intentions, want to move them through that a lot quicker, but that also delays the recovery as well. So I think it's really important to hold space for the negative emotions, even if they're uncomfortable.
And how you help them to understand all these things?
So in our sessions and in our consults, we always invite the next of kin, we invite the family member, whoever their like most trusted relationship in their life may be, to come into a session at some point, because we need them, like I said before, to be on the journey with us and to be sitting there. I call it like a bit of a virtual bus. We're all on the bus together. The client is in the driver's seat, and we're all sitting on the bus. So that's the physio, myself, their doctor, their specialist, their workplace is in there. So everyone's on this, but the client's in charge, and their next of kin and their family member needs to be right there with them as well every step of the way. So in terms of involving the family really early on, we educate. So a big piece of that is educating about injuries are not just straightforward. This is not just, unfortunately, a broken finger. There's going to be a lot more to this. So educating a bit of the marathon that's up ahead is always really helpful in terms of managing those expectations, but also identifying what the family member can do to help that particular injured person is really important as well early on. So we run through with them, how to help have a routine, how to still be connected during the injury time, how to still, connect with family as well, not isolate that person. Like all these things are so important.
Mm. Mm. There is a story that you can share that stay with you and you want to share with us.
I was thinking about that like before we came in today. Like out of over 10 years of doing this, it's so hard when there's so many beautiful stories and so many beautiful clients
Mhm.
that, we've seen get to the end of their recovery, and go on and no longer need us anymore. Like at the start of sessions with patients, I always say that, there's going to be a day where you realize you don't need me anymore. And that's the day that we're working for, like from the very beginning. And I may not know when that day is, but you're going to know and you're going to feel it. And then you're just going to know that the time is here and you're able to be independent. And that's the whole purpose of the workers' compensation scheme, is to get people to a point of independence. But the one that stands out to me, if I may, was from a couple of years ago. I was supporting this client who had a non-work related injury. So he had actually sustained a stroke, and that was impacting the left side of his body. He was only in his 40s, quite a young gentleman. And I met him outside of his workplace. So a key thing as a rehabilitation counsellor is we need to be able to support people where they're at. So it's really important, I believe, to walk in the door of the workplace together, like next to that person, that there's no separation. You're actually there to physically support them going into any important meetings. And this particular client of mine, he had when I met him outside the front of the building, he was there with all the family in the car. So he actually had his wife in the car, and there was 3 tiny little kids. I believe they were like all under the age of 7. So really, really small, all in the car together. Obviously, they only had one car they were able to get around in. The family had wanted to come with him, and it was one of those real moments of like seeing the significance of Dad going into this meeting today really is going to impact everyone in this car. Like that is the significance of it. So my client got out of the car. I said hi to his wife, said hi to little kids. He got out of the car, and as he was walking towards the doors, he gets out of his pocket this tiny little comb that he just wanted to make sure that he brushed the hair that he had left on his head, that he looked as polished and as professional as possible going into this really big meeting. And that image just sticks with me because he was looking in the reflection of the glass and just fixing up his hair and making sure, straightening his shirt, that he looked as good as he could, because for people, work is actually a big part of their identity. So for him, it was so important going into this big workplace meeting. And we walked in together, and the workplace themselves were quite unsupportive. And certainly some workplaces, after you've been doing this long enough, are unsupportive, and that they're really, really challenging to return people back to work because there's just not that education within the employer that there are obligations in Australia to support these people. So I was sitting in this big meeting room, this huge, huge boardroom, and he and I are sitting down one end, and the employer is sitting a little bit further up. And the employer and HR start talking about, that he's not fit for duty, that they can't support him, and just seeing his face just be so distressed and thinking about the man and the family that's down in that car down there waiting for something good today to happen so that he can be supported to return to work, so that he can be supported to have an income again, as they're clearly struggling as a family, absolutely was heartbreaking. And it's in that moment that then I stand up and I reiterate there's obligations in Australia to support people with different injuries and disabilities and conditions, and reasonable workplace adjustments that you are required to have in place for this man. And that is my role, to run through that and to clearly make sure he is supported and he's able to actually return to work in some shape or form. So in that particular instance, being able to be there in that moment and not have this beautiful man sit in that meeting room on his own and be absolutely unsupported, for me, that was the why we do what we do. And I was actually able to help him. And that for me is what sticks with that. And thinking about the little ones that are out in the car, that, their life, at least something was going to be a bit more improved after that day.
So this man then he got his job back.
He did, yeah, in a modified way. So he would be doing modified duties, modified hours to start with, and slowly integrating back into the workplace, which is what he's entitled to do. And he needs to be given the chance. And that's the big thing, is that we notice that a lot of people don't understand that they are afforded that chance, that there's a lot that, can be negotiated. But a lot of workplaces are quite resistant unless they're reminded of their obligations to do that.
It's so sad that we are in this society to throw the unfortunate in the bin as a useless. Wow. Thank you, Chantelle, for your story. Is I feel touched.
Yeah, it was just, and that is one of 10, over 10 years of stories and experiences that I am privileged to be there and be that shield for my clients every day. And I think it's those types of moments that stick with you, because it's like, okay, had I not been there, what would have been the outcome? What would have happened when he went downstairs with the comb in his pocket and got back in that car and told his very young family, I don't have a job? That is the consequences that we're dealing with here. So for me, I'm so, so honored to be that shield and to be able to actually protect these people. And I think that for me is, that's the why we do what we do, those moments.
What is misunderstanding about recovering from workplace?
I think a lot of people misunderstand, I suppose, that the workers' compensation scheme is designed to return you to work. So that is a really big point from the outset. So whatever legislation you fall under, whether that's WorkSafe Queensland or WorkCover WA or Comcare if you're employed with a government department, everyone has a focus of the return to work benefits and health benefits of good work. So everyone's a signatory. All the government departments are related to that. So that is something that's in place. So I think for some people, they may feel that workers' comp or, in Australia, there's kind of a bit of a negative slant to be like, on compo, like that type of language, when it's actually so, incorrect. Whereas people are actually on compensation to actually return to work and recover, which is so important that they're given the chance to do that. So I think from the outset, people have a misunderstanding about that and they get stuck in the stigma of, someone being on compo and what that may look like when there's actually real life consequences for that, and that they are trying their very best to get back to work. And that's what we're here to ensure happens for those people.
Mm. How many people work with you?
We have a team now of beautiful, beautiful physios and occupational therapists and social workers. It's close to, I believe, there's a few in all different states. So it kind of changes, obviously, as we go because we have some new mediators as well. But it's quite a big team. So we have some based in every state in Australia and also in New Zealand and overseas too. So it's quite an evolving team and one that, certainly from a mediation perspective, there's been a lot more mediators we've brought on and noticed there's been a real rise in that. So that's been really great too.
Wow. So you have someone is a lawyer as well in this.
No, so
You
I'm
study
actually a
law as
mediator
well.
as well. So I'm
And
a rehabilitation counsellor and nationally accredited mediator.
yeah.
And we work with other mediators in our team too to run co-mediations for workplace disputes. But funny you say that because when I actually did do the mediation course through the University of Western Australia, I was the only rehabilitation counsellor, the only health professional in there. And there was only other lawyers and Harvard law graduates that were in there as well. So it was quite funny that I was kind of educating all of them about what a rehabilitation counsellor does because not a lot of people know. So definitely, that's been really great to be able to have that exposure in mediation too.
Congratulations. Um, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions
Sure.
about advice about the injured
Yeah.
and the partner. If you can give one advice for each, what would you say?
Okay. I'll start off first with the partner, if I may.
Hmm.
I would say for the partners, I would say to give grace for this person who's going through this injury. And by grace, I mean that just because things may have, like I said, a good moment, it doesn't mean that they're fully recovered. It also affords them the time and the grieving that they may need after that type of injury as well. So I think grace is the most important, but also grace to themselves of their whole life has changed as well because of the injury that's happened in the family unit. So I think grace is so important for the entire relationships that go on in those family units. But for the actual person who has sustained the injury, I would like to say to them this, that I want them to picture themselves walking into a forest right now. Just bear with me for the visualization. There's a method to my madness. I want them to picture walking into a forest and it's a little bit dark out. In the distance, they hear all this talking and all this laughing and these really positive conversations. And they're just this in the distance, they can't really hear anything, but they're just walking into the forest with this trust. And they're walking in with this injury and they're in pain and they're uncomfortable and things are not good, but they're just walking towards this lovely campfire they can see that's in the distance, this light that's there. Then they get to the campfire, and when they want their hands at the campfire, they're looking around and they see at the campfire there's all these past versions of themselves. So there is the one that's there in from high school, there's the one that's there from primary school, there's the one that's there at their first job, there's the one that's there from all these different life milestones. So they're standing around the campfire and they're so happy to see you. They're so happy and they're so excited to hear how you've been. And you say to these vast versions of you that things are not good, like something really bad has happened, like this big bad injury has happened to me and things are never going to be the same. And you pause, and all the past versions of you pause for a moment and then look at you and they say that, things are going to be okay. Look how you got through this hard thing and this hard thing. And they remind you of all these past hard things that happened. And then you're standing there and you're basking in this warmth and you're there at the campfire and you're seeing everyone and everyone's just so hopeful and wanting you to get through this. And then the sun's starting to come up and you start to walk out of the forest and you're walking away from the campfire. And then I meet you on the edge of the forest and I say to you that I'm going to be right here. We're going to walk out together and we're going to get you through this. And then that's exactly what we do. So that's what I'd like to tell them today, that you will get through it. Yeah.
I was looking at your reviews,
Mm.
and everyone that read these reviews in restorative this is your website, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. For example, from Lauren, words can't describe how grateful I am for all your support, kindness, and gentle guidance over the past year. All these reviews tell me what a beautiful work you're doing and how important it is have someone like you in such an important moment in their life.
Yeah. So true. That's so beautiful. Thank you. And I know exactly like who those clients are. And I
Yeah.
think like for that visualization and even, working with my clients, it's so important what they tell themselves.
Yeah.
It means so much more than anything I will ever tell them. That's what they need to listen to the most. So it's just so beautiful to hear. And yeah, I have been so, so privileged to have the most incredible patients or like through my entire career and to be able to be there to support them through this hard chapter. And that's what I reiterate is that it's a hard chapter, that your life will go on beyond this is so, yeah, I'm just the luckiest. I'm the luckiest.
Thank you so much, Chantal. We are at the end of this first interview. I hope to have you again because I will have more questions for you. So, can you please tell to our listeners where they can find you if they need your service?
Absolutely. So please meet us when you need us. We are here for any work related problem that you may have, workplace dispute, workplace injury, psychological or physical, and to support you to return to work in some way. So you can find us at restorativereferrals.com.au or type Chantelle Wood into Google and it will come up quite quickly.
Before to leave, can I ask you to leave all listeners with one of your um, uh, thought and whatever you want to say before to leave?
Oh, good question. Um, I think I'd like to leave them with the idea that if you're listening to this and that someone that you deeply care about is going through a work problem of some kind, letting them know that they're not alone and you're not alone, and that there are professionals out there that do specialize in this particular type of domain, and that there is support available. So please know that you don't have to navigate that as a family or as a couple or independently on your own, that it's really important to link you in with the right people and ensure that you've got that support. So that would be the last thought. And that thank you so much for having me. It's been such a privilege.
Fantastic. Thank you, Chantal, from restorative you based in Perth, help people with injuries. Thank you for your fantastic job. I'm very proud to have your words on my podcast. And for all of you that you listen this podcast to this episode, have a look at the other one. There is a lot of interesting conversation. There is one is coming out about this beautiful group that help young girls in Nepal to get safe from being smuggled around Western Asia. And it's a fantastic episode. Go to check it out. It's coming out very, very soon. Otherwise, there is many other conversation about sex and couples, food and couples, anything. See you at the next episode of Progress Over Perfection. Thank you, Chantelle Wood from Restorative Referrals that come to you to help people with injuries. See you next time. Ciao.